we go. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our expert panel of speakers. This is the Selling Against the Odds webinar, a very important webinar with some really great information for everybody. This is the 7th in our webinar series presented by FreedomWorks members for FreedomWorks members. We have a fantastic panel of 3 experts today, and you can see their pictures and also them live on the screen. They all have complementary skills and experience. Jeff comes from a sales perspective, David from a marketing perspective, and Paul, who will be providing real-life case study examples. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of their experience that they bring to the table, Jeff Downs, MD and the joint founder of Quantum, a long-established sales improvement consultancy. For 28 years, he specialized in driving behavioral change in large selling operations and in the coaching of salespeople, sales managers and senior executives. David A. Richards, with his lifetime experience in developing customer value propositions and communication strategies, David started his company Talk About Value Limited in 2018 to offer advice to SMEs about how to create, validate, and then communicate their genuine value to their prospects and customers. And finally, Paul Wait, a 47-year veteran of the travel industry, having held senior leadership positions at American Express Travel, Virgin Atlantic Airways, the Guild of Travel Management Companies, and Southall Travel. Paul founded RedApple7 in 2018, a consultancy practice delivering experience-led services that include business transformation, business development, leadership, digital marketing, and procurement and supply chain management. So welcome to our expert panel. Just a brief talk about the format for today. It's going to be a 45-minute interactive conversation with the panel, between myself and the panel. Please post your questions either in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can at the end and during the presentation. But if we don't get round to yours, we will follow up with you later. Your camera is going to be off today and you will be on mute. So there's no pressure. You can just sit back and enjoy. And as I said, post any questions that you have and we will get round to answering those as well as we can. So to start today, my first question is going to go to Jeff. So Jeff, what do you need to be good at to sell in a challenging economic environment as we are experiencing at the moment? Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I've lived through recessions in my lifetime and in my career. And there's a few things I've noticed, and that is things get tougher from the point of view that obviously the cake gets smaller, so the market becomes more competitive. And that leads to competitors maybe using price as a weapon to try to win business or to stop you winning it. So I think one of the characteristics is that we are to expect more price pressure. But the other thing that happens is that budgets are often cut or sometimes moved as well. And the people that perhaps you're used to dealing with, who used to be able to make decisions, can't do that anymore. They have to go upstairs, as it were, to get the sign-off. So that there is actually a need to sell at a higher level as well. And because of the price pressure, there's a huge need to be able to sell value, because really it's a race to the bottom if you try to compete by just lowering your prices. So I would say in summary, it's first of all, be different, know what your differentiators are, aim to sell higher and reach people that are more senior and engage with them. And through all of that, manage to sell the value rather than the price, what it is that you're selling. I know that from working with Paul at Virgin Atlantic, he faced one or two challenging economic environments, didn't you, Paul? I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Yeah, well, at the time, I think we had everything from 9/11 to Ash Cloud to one of the original SARS pandemics to the financial crash in 2008. So, and on top of that, there were just normal ups and downs of the marketplace, really. And I'd say, kind of in relation to that question, there's a few things that you have to be good at. Number one is you've got to be a pretty good storyteller. You've got to be able to tell a story that's going to engage and interest people, and it's got to be both. It's got to be relevant to both the buyer and the company. It's no just talking about the company. There's got to be something in that for the buyer, because, and the person that you made relationship with, because being their reputation at the same time. I think you've also got to set a different tone to your competitors. During that time, my team, would tell you, we just said, just go out and be positive, just, be very high profile, go talk to customers, and be very sort of empathetic with them, but support them with different ideas and different suggestions, because your contracts could be in place. They may be based upon, sort of bulk volumes. And what the majority of our competitors were doing at the time was just going around with sour faces and agreeing with people, and sort of almost like not trying to reset the tone, but agreeing with the doom and gloom that was around and the folded arms, and there's nothing an awful lot that we can do. And just one of the things that we did was that we reviewed every single contract and started to review those contracts. And if we knew they were going to fail, we just stopped them, prorate them, and start again. And if you couldn't do something that was intended for the year, do it for the next 3 to 6 months. So I think that, and during those particular challenges at times, being high profile and realizing that you had to be different and do something different was key to us. Actually, we used to enjoy, the team used to enjoy when times were tough, and when the economy was going through a tough time, because we tended to pick up an awful lot of business at that time, that when demand came back, it would just naturally grow, because you had the building blocks in place.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, David?
Yeah, I was just going to say that everybody understands in a recession that there's a potential that your prices will need to decrease, or there's an expectation. And I think what it forces you to do, and part of the whole conversation today, is understanding your customers at a deeper level than you currently do. And if you understand the value that they see in what you're offering, then you can support your prices more easily. And rather than discount, you can charge the same price, but make them feel that they're getting actually more for their money. And I'm sure Jeff will come on to that in the next section. Amazing,
thank you. So Jeff, what is the art and science behind successful selling? Big question.
Interesting question that we often discuss, to what degree is selling an art rather than science. And most people are towards the art side of things. They think about it being about relationships and chemistry. And of course it is, but it's much more than that. There's much more science that can be applied to it, but a lot of people don't realize that. A little talk I give sometimes is called The Secret Life of a Successful Salesperson. And the reason why I call it that is a lot of successful salespeople, if you ask them what makes them successful, they don't know. They can't actually quantify it. But we can, and some people can and some people can't. So the quantification really is about how you classify the sales activity that needs to go in to produce a result. And largely speaking, it breaks down into 3 areas, and everyone on the call can do this, and you might already do it. But those 3 areas are the quantity of selling, the direction of selling, and the quality of your selling. So the quantity of selling, simply, how many calls do you need to do? How many leads do you need to generate? And if you understand your numbers and you understand your ratios through the sales process, that can be calculated. You can therefore work out what your sales activity needs to be every day, every week, every month. But of course, that activity needs to be focused. And if you're selling a range of products and services to a range of customers, if there's a mix of business you're trying to achieve in certain sectors, if there is new business to be won, as well as looking after existing, all of those things equate to the direction of your sales effort. So the quantity needs to be right, the direction needs to be right as well, according to the shape of result you're trying to achieve. And again, that can be planned. And another huge directional aspect that people often miss is the level we sell at as well. Take my previous point about needing to sell higher in a recessionary, but generally speaking, I need to consider the stakeholders that you need to engage with to get the organization as a whole to perceive the value of your solution. So we've got quantity and direction is a big part of the science. The third part of the science, and this is the bit perhaps is the more popular and sexy bit, which is the quality of your selling in terms of the preparation that goes into each sales call, and then the sales conversation is actually had and what goes on during that process, particularly in relation to understanding customers' needs and wants before pitching the products and service. Number one mistake that people selling make is actually pitching too early, not spending enough time really understanding the needs and wants of the people they're selling to and their organizations. And I'm sure David will be coming on to this. If you don't understand that, you're not really going to get proper engagement and proper customer commitment. It's a big measurable around quality as well that I would mention. It's called your conversion ratio. Because as you improve the quality of your sales effort, so your hit rates will improve as well. And it's probably the main driver behind the other 2 points as well in terms of quantity and direction. If we're capable, if we're good at doing it, we'll do more of it. We'll get more success, and then we'll do even more. So, the answer is actually I would put science the sort of 7 out of 10 on the continuum. Most people put art about 7 out of 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true, Jeff. Again, going back to to the early days, Virgin Atlantic was already a hugely successful business, and we were very much sort of selling on those relationships. And the number of times internally, by internally I mean the rest of the business would turn around and say, well, of course the product sells itself, doesn't it, Paul? Then you realize actually I've got a very big convincing job to do within the organization, let alone outside. But in simple terms, when you talk about the art and science, and I hear this again a lot about, well, it's the importance, it's all about relationships. And Jeff's right, your relationship is important, but increasing your chances of success, you actually need a combination of things. And also, if it's just based upon a relationship, I've asked the question, just how much business are you leaving behind if you're not applying all of the things that you could do? So in simple terms, I'd say it's a question of, having skills, competencies, and the tools that Quantum provided us with, and then applying them on a regular basis. And here's the thing also, this needs constant practice. It kind of amazed me that, top sports people, would train every day, to be at the top. Yeah, I come across many sales teams and people who either have had no training and development, very little, and even if they have had that development, then they don't sit within a business that has a sales culture, which means that that is constantly being supported, by the leadership of that particular business. And it just amazes me. I think on this particular element, actually, and I know Jeff's had me bang on this about for many, many years, but I think that, companies within the UK could be a lot more successful if they actually truly took the profession of selling a lot more, seriously. And it's, you don't find, selling skills either in a university or in a business school, don't you? And maybe that's a problem. Maybe it should actually be there. But then again, we'd need people like Jeff if we had them in universities.
If I can just follow up on that one, if I may, Joanne. Spinning the clock back a few years, if you were to ask anybody who the top sales and marketing organization was in the whole world, right? Certainly in the top 3 would have been IBM, right? And I was talking to an ex-IBMer yesterday, and he was telling me about their sales training. And he said that before you're even allowed to see a customer or prospect, they go to the IBM sales school, which is 9 months of sales training. Most people in sales, they're probably, solopreneurs type businesses as well. And, they don't get 9 minutes of sales training.
No, it's incredible.
And when you add to that, that 9-month program actually wasn't about the training, it was about the practice. It was about role playing, video, feedback, and coaching. So it's all very well us sitting here and saying, oh, we need to be better at, professional selling in this economic environment. It's not necessarily an easy thing to achieve. It's not a question of just sitting in on a few webinars or going on some e-learning programs at the moment or virtual learning. It's so much about putting it into practice. And the problem is either individuals or people or members of sales teams, they walk around unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they're doing and they don't know what they're not doing. So therefore they can't change it.
No, indeed. It's very interesting to hear your remarks on that. We've got a question actually that's come in from Nick Swan. So it is related to what you've been talking about. He asks, how valuable is good chemistry with your prospect when selling, i.e. you have a brilliant product or service, but you struggle to get on and engage with your prospect. How big a factor to getting a deal is a poor relationship? Big question.
It's absolutely vital, Nick, and everyone. If you haven't built the relationship, you're not going to get the business. But sometimes you build relationships and you still don't get the business. So
I think sorry, Jeff.
Paul.
I think it is a very relevant point actually, because it can also be sometimes the relationship can be too strong, which in itself can be a problem. It can be quite the reverse. But really, one of the things that we practiced really was make sure that when you're building that relationship, you're asking lots of questions about the business. You're also finding out what your value proposition is going to be for that particular customer. What's in it for them? And many situations I've been in, when you get to that final point of actually, is this deal going to go ahead or not? It's really down to the fact that they're worried about making such a big decision. And how it's going to affect them, within their organization. It's their credibility at stake. So one of the things I would say, and I'd be in a director position or a general manager position, so in a senior position, and I would just turn around and say to them, so look, I know that this is a big decision for you. Remember one thing, I'm responsible for your reputation within this organization. And I will take personal interest in making sure that that your reputation is maintained and enhanced. There was not one occasion when after that conversation that deal wasn't then signed, because you've got joint accountability. But at the very beginning, it is about making sure that you balance your questions about the business with also questions about how change would affect that person's situation, how it would be perceived, what the difficulties and challenges are for that individual within their own organization. So I think if you take an interest in the person and what affects them as well as the business, I think it helps build that rapport as you're also building that trust.
If I could just
would you say as well that if you've got someone in an organization who really just doesn't have the chemistry, would you just not pass it over to somebody else who does? I know that I certainly used to work in tandem with my workshop manager in that way. Sometimes when I had my business, I didn't get on very well with the customer and he got on with them really, really well. And we would actually work in tandem with each other as appropriate.
Yeah, that's happened, Joe. That's certainly a case whereby, you can bring in other people with maybe a different speciality, not sort of brought in on the guise of you've got to get on with this guy, but more upon talking upon a specific subject where you could have an alternative way of building that relationship as well.
Yeah, and I've had a comment here from Barry Hunt who says, well, in fact, it was in response to something that Kate Henwood said, that you need to build trust, and people buy from people that they like. And Barry has said that he agrees with Kate and Jeff. And interestingly, he said they've recently swapped some accounts around, which has given a fresh approach and impetus and enabled us to uncover different opportunities. So as you say, maybe sometimes the relationship just becomes too close, you become too familiar, and you actually miss out on opportunities. That likewise.
Yeah, Joe, if I could just add to that
Yeah,
point
sure.
about building trust and credibility. In a prospecting situation, of course, that is the biggest challenge when you're meeting somebody for the first time, and perhaps in a half an hour, 1 hour call, you've got to gain that personal trust. And so we have to work hard on how to do that. And above all, we all know that people form impressions very quickly in the first 5 minutes. And that's probably, in my experience over the last 30 years or so, going out with salespeople and watching what they're doing and coaching them. It's another one of those big mistakes, big opportunities that's missed, in addition to pitching too early. Probably this is the second one. They miss the opportunity to create a good first impression. So there's so many simple things one can do in terms of checking time, swapping business cards. Is it Robert? Is it Bob? And then let me tell you, everyone, another big faux pas is doing an elevator pitch at the beginning of the meeting. Stop doing that. You might need to do that at networking events. At the beginning of the meeting, all you need to do is a thumbnail sketch of your organization. No pitching, no value judgments. Just, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we're about. And then after that, can we move on more to what you're about, what your needs and wants are, what your requirements are, and quickly get into that conversation, because yes, people do buy from people they like, and you know what, they like you if you take a big interest in them. And,
Fantastic.
and
Thank you, Jim.
people underestimate the amount of effort that needs to go into that.
Absolutely. My next question for you, Jeff, is what is the secret to selling on value, avoiding the pressure to reduce price, and what should I do when someone asks for a discount?
Okay, I'm sure David will have a lot to say about this in a moment. But yeah, hey, the biggest thing around price is, first of all, get your head around it, right? Believe in your proposition, believe in your product, believe in the value. Because you might get told every day, and probably increasingly in the coming months, you'll be told, you're too expensive, I need a discount. Please, and we're not going to do business unless you drop your prices. But they would say that, wouldn't they? They're trying to get the best possible deal from you, particularly procurement people, but everybody's trying to get the best possible deal. So the first thing is, absolutely believe in the value of what you're selling, no matter what the customer says. And to paraphrase a Henry Ford quote, if you think you're too expensive, you probably will be. So really have that cast iron belief in your pricing. Secondly, if somebody gives you a price objection, what you need to do is love your competitors. It's strange to love your competitors. Let me tell you why. When somebody says you're too expensive, you need to give me a discount, first question you should ask, compared with what? Right, or who are you comparing us with, or what have you, and find out what the difference is, what their perception is. So for example, your products and service is £110, and they've got some competitive quotes and they're £100. Say to your competitors, oh, thank you so much. You've already sold £100 worth of value for me. That's absolutely brilliant. Because all I need to do now is sell the £10 difference and show what the extra value is that we can bring to the party. Now, of course, you have to have something that adds more value, and I'll hand over to David in a moment. You can't just say, oh, but we've got better products, we've got better service, or you've got me and I'm your account manager. You can't just say that. It has to be genuine value that you've identified earlier on in the conversation regarding their needs and wants and what they're trying to achieve. If you do that, you've got a great chance of selling the extra 10 quid. But you can't just pitch it and throw mud at the wall and hope some of it's going to stick, right? You have to do the hard yards earlier from a sales perspective. David, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think the critical theme that's coming out from this session is you need to talk about their business, not yours. I think, and you need to keep on questioning. And it relates to a statement about salespeople that I've heard in the past that sometimes over a period of time, they lose their mojo and their ability to sell. And the main reason is they get so familiar with their relationships that they stop asking questions. And guess what? Customers' needs change over time. And if you've missed that because you haven't been asking and involved in those types of conversations, when they come around to rebidding for your business, you've got an incorrect view of what they're looking for. And I think that's really critical. And I'll, as you rightly say, I'll be talking about that in the next few minutes.
Fantastic. And on that subject, actually, Ian Lawrence has just said that he recalls you, Jeff, talking about these personal icebergs. It's a good point because he tends to focus on the organizational needs, not on the needs of the individual. And those can sometimes be different.
Yeah. Do you want me to expand upon that slightly?
Yeah, please.
Joanne? Yeah. So human behavior is like an iceberg. You've got the 1/9 above the surface and then the 8/9 beneath the surface. And the 1/9 in business terms is just what they're saying to you, that their needs. It's almost like the request for a proposal, and this is the specification. This is the quality that we're looking for. This is the delivery we're looking for. This is the after-sale service. But what's going on beneath that in terms of the emotional wants of the person you're selling to? What's happening there? And of course, those wants are more emotionally driven rather than logically driven. So it's things like their ego. It might be job security. It might be they're heading for promotion. It might be they want to have a bigger house than their friend from school, or a better car. Whatever it is. And every single person we sell to has got a different set of wants. And one of the points I often make is, look, there's a lot of talk about unique selling points. They're really hard to find. But you know what? There's about 7 billion, something like that, the population of the earth, unique buying points. Because every single person is different. And to be effective at selling, we need to get to those wants, bottom of the iceberg, as quickly as we can and as effectively as we can.
Fantastic.
Jeffrey, you may remember a couple of these examples, but I remember one of my team calling me in one day to a very large insurance company in London, and they'd been a holdout for years, and he introduced me to a lady who was the travel buyer, and this usual conversation was going along, and I just asked her one question. I said, "When was the last time you flew Virgin Atlantic?" And then she went, "About 5 years ago to South Africa," and went into this tirade of how she actually hated it because the aircraft had gone technical and had to stay overnight. That question I'm not asked before, but it was purely that one experience that she had, which had been a poor one, which meant that she was a blocker for the entire negotiation in relation to that particular contract. We did manage to dissuade her to try us one more time. And after that, then we managed to sign a contract with her. But it's a classic case. You've got to, as you say, and as Ian has suggested there, remember to, sort of ask a few questions about the individual as well, and make sure you haven't got any of those emotional blockers standing in the way of what is, normally good selling.
Fantastic, thank you. On to my next question, and this is for David. How do I find out what my customers value from my business?
Well, you have to talk to them, I think, fundamentally, but you have to talk about their business, but not yours. You don't want to, as some people say, turn up and throw up. You want to have a conversation with your customers. And frankly, this isn't something you can do quickly, easily, as a one-off or without planning, or in a way having your regular conversations, or maybe as an afterthought. You really need to put this type of conversation and this type of insight as a critical part of your business. And in a way, this is the essence of marketing to me. It's about understanding your prospects' needs, which actually may be quite different from what they want, and also what you want to sell them. So we all know today that marketing is often interpreted by many people as just the word promotion. Being a bit old school, I think it's more about the market and how you bring value to your customers by solving their problems or offering them potentially new opportunities for growth. So talking about value, there's a couple of definitions I would share with you today, which may be of interest. The first one is quite an in-depth one, which is value is the perceived relevant and distinct benefit you offer minus the total cost of ownership. So it's the perceived relevant and distinct benefit minus the total cost of ownership. So it's a bit like the cost benefit analysis, but rather than on a transactional basis, it's over a lifetime of interactions. So that's where you need to broaden your value. Another interpretation may be simply the price somebody is willing to pay. And if you offer more value, then people are prepared to pay more or pay the same amount in more difficult times. So rather than give you definitions, I thought it might be useful in this session to give you 5 sources of value that you have within your business that you may or not be using at the moment. And it comes from a book called Valuology, which I think is a great book. And they define these 5 as follows. So the first one is the one you probably know really well, which is the economic value. And this is typically the cost of a transaction minus the amount, the return you get on it. In a way, you could call that value for money. And it's purely about the, if you like, the science of the transaction. Am I getting the value I think I'm getting for the money I'm paying? And we all know this from the retail industry and the consumer industry. That's the sort of judgment. The value for money judgment is one that we can readily do. But value comes from perceived value as well. And this is more about giving and getting. So what would you give to get what you want? And this could be a tangible thing or it could be an intangible thing. And if you think about markets where perceived value is really important, like luxury items, it can be more about the status or the brand or just the bragging rights, if you like, with your friends and peers. And the perceived value you can see from an item, and a luxury item, you would do virtually anything to achieve that. And if the price is so, you would probably pay that as well. Plus, remember, perceived value, there's a strong link between price and quality. And if you use that, you can use that in your pricing strategy, because we generally associate that if it's a high price, it will be a high quality and therefore high value item that you are using. So perceived value is really important. The third one is relational value. And this is the links between people. And we've touched on this already today. We all know people buy from people, but it does take time to develop that type of relationship. And it includes just more than the product you're offering. It's offering all the things around the product that you may be able to supply, like fantastic customer service or complaints handling or fantastic distribution. But you may also have the capability to provide access to your networks of trust, the people you know that your customer might be interested in linking up with. Because if you've sort of pre-qualified them, they can go to your trusted network and get real value for them without huge cost to sale. So building critical relationships, particularly in the business to business world, is really important. And again, we've talked about that. The fourth one is something described as experiential, or the experience you have with the supplier. And this is where the day-to-day interactions, those touch points you have with your customers, is really important. Every single one of those, as we've discussed earlier, the experience with the lady who flew Virgin can have a real impact on the value that they see. And if you can address that and change it so it's more favorable, that can have a seriously important effect on your business. And then finally, the last one is social value. And you've probably heard quite a lot these days about the 4 new Ps of business, which is profit, people, planet, and purpose. So if you're doing things within your business that is giving something back or perceived to giving something back, are you doing something beyond making a profit? Are you offering something for nothing that people will benefit from? So these are the 5 areas I would ask you to consider when you go back to your business this afternoon. Is are you looking at the economic value you give, the perceived value of what you're offering, your relationships you have with people, the experience you're giving people, and are you doing something on beyond profit? I'm sure, Paul, you've got some examples of one or more of those, so please share them with us.
Yeah, something in some of the things that you've said there, how we actually got to find out what our customers value was a range of different ways, actually. One was that we would have an event program that one of my bosses many years ago would have called the Happy Program, because there was no strategy behind it. Whereas the strategy we had at Virgin was very well thought through with regards to what it is that we wanted to achieve from that program. And that was, as David has just mentioned there, we'd bring people in who were maybe either new to doing business with us or weren't too sure. And we'd have an event whereby they would mix with people who are real advocates of Virgin Atlantic. And so they would build confidence and trust through the experiences of other people, a bit like human TripAdvisor, you could say, in that sense. And another one, I've done this recently for, one of my existing customers, Autocab. They were bringing a new product to market. And so I set up a user group with the PA Club. And if you really want to find out what's going on and what's valued and what you need to do, then, sort of get to talk to some of the users, the PAs and the, and the secretaries and the bookers, if it's, something like travel, for instance, but in any business really, get to talk to the users. And this is a way in which we very quickly established for a new product that we were building, what were the real hotspots for them, things they really valued, and some things that weren't necessarily important, even though at the time we thought that that they might have been. So if you've got the budget, events, if not user groups, very easy to put forward. That's a way of getting some, good feedback as to what's valued and what isn't. And I think also, the thing you also have to do is build relationships within your customer outside of the normal buy relationship. And what I would do is I'd match people off. So I'd get the MD to meet the MD of the company. I'd get the CFO to do with the CFO. Anything along that whereby you could match up people within the hierarchy was a way also just of deepening that relationship and de-risking your business as well as building your business.
And getting to know the whole organization and
Correct.
outside of the individual. Yes, absolutely.
Correct.
And you just there, Paul, very, very succinctly shown the benefits of having really good testimonials, case studies, real life experiences, anecdotes, stories, as you would say, about the experiences you've had with your customers and prospects. And we're as you say, when you buy something, you're taking a little bit of a risk and putting your own brand, your own personal brand, on a bit of an edge, because you want to make sure that you're not going to be let down. And if you've got other people who can be advocates for your business, that's brilliant, because generally people will believe those advocates, not yourself.
Correct.
Absolutely. So my value proposition, I'm taking into account those 5 aspects of my value proposition. And actually, it would be really good, David, if you could give us the details of the book Valuology as well, so that anybody wants to pick that up later.
It's a great book, and it's an relatively easy read, I should say. So yeah, I think the important thing is we've talked about these five let's call them sources of value at your disposal. And what you need to do really is to look at your own marketplace, the one you're working in, and you may or may not have broken your market down into different segments or groups of customers that you work with, because you will probably find that there are people who have different needs, and there's no point in having one value proposition for your entire product range if you have people with different needs, because frankly, you need to match your value proposition to the different needs that they have. So once you've defined, if you like, the segments you're going to target, you need to use the sources of value we discussed, the relationships perceived, experiential, economic and social, and then talk to them about that in a particularly, a meaningful way. It may be even having a separate conversation with them. For example, when you've won a new piece of business, have you ever asked your customers, perhaps not on that day, but later after your relationship, why they actually bought from you? because I've done that on behalf of other customers, and what I found out is the reason people bought from a company was completely different from what I was told by the salesperson involved. The salesperson said it was price, and the customer said it was value. And that insight has transformed the way that company now works in terms of the way they work with their customers in the future. So in terms of a value proposition, let's again use another organization that I particularly like, which is the Strategizer organization. They developed a business model called the Business Model Canvas, which some of you have probably heard of, which is a new framework and is being heavily used. I think it's one of the most frequently used strategic models you can have today. And they have a framework for what is a value proposition. So I'll just tell you what that is. So the way it works is our products and services or expertise help our customers in a particular area who want to do a job by solving their pains and creating benefits, unlike our competitors. So I'll just do that once again. Our products and services or professional expertise help our customers in a particular segment with a particular need who want to do a particular job by solving pains and creating benefits, unlike our customers. So for example, I'll give you mine. So my consultancy helps small and medium-sized enterprise who want to be more effective in the way they communicate their value by reducing the cost of their marketing budgets and creating new market opportunities, unlike other consultants who I compete against. That's an example of a value proposition. And the important thing is, you don't have one. You might, if you only have one market and one focus, you might have one, but you need to think at different levels. What you might find is the sources of value might actually be the same in many cases, but the priority that your customers put on those sources will be different if they have different needs. Jeff and Paul, I don't know if you have any comment on that.
I think, it depends obviously what business you're in, but people used to think when I was at Virgin Atlantic we were selling seats. Well, we weren't. People would talk about the seat in upper class or club class, wherever the case may be. But yeah, we'd have different propositions for different people. I mean, we specifically targeted the women business travelers from a personal security perspective, with regards to the fact that once inside the cabin, there are a number of things that they could use their own particular unit for. But the one thing they were in control of was their own personal space. They could be as personal or they could be as private as they wished. And that's what the upper class cabin, provided them with, as opposed to with some airlines, you can, the women executives were telling me that you felt quite, threatened in a way, because maybe they're sitting directly opposite somebody staring at them, which they found quite intrusive and uncomfortable. Another case, one was just peace of mind. We won a major accountancy firm's business on the basis that one of the executives who hadn't flown with us before was trying to get onto the 6 o'clock flight to New York as a trial, was in the limo on the way to the airport. Problems on the M4, because the limo could call to the wing were waiting for them, walked straight their way through security. Even though they didn't leave their office until an hour before the flight, when they should be checking in at that time, they were sat down with a glass of champagne 5 doors before before the doors closed. And so that's that's how you're not selling a seat. You're selling something completely different, and how you've got to tailor the value proposition either according to that business and the business and the buyer in that particular case, what they're going to get out of it, but also the individual traveler and what they're going to get from it as well.
Well, Paul, I had the experience in the 90s. I used to fly to America quite a lot, and I could choose who I flew by, and I always thought of Virgin and his experience rather than a product or a seat, because I'd be in what it used to be called first business or the business class, and quite often I'd turn up with a tie at the front desk and be upgraded to first, or I'd be offered a free facial massage or a little nice toilet bag with stuff in it. So I saw it as you know, the flight was going to be enjoyable rather than sitting and looking
Correct.
at nothing. And I think that's the subtlety of the difference.
Absolutely. Actually, there's a question that comes from Ian here. So based on what you've said about your value proposition and getting to know your customer, so if you've been asked to bid or for somebody and the organization refuses to have any pre-engagement with you, on that basis, then it's virtually impossible to discover A, what their real needs are, and B, to communicate your value. So would you have a policy that you wouldn't actually get involved in those kind of bids with those organizations?
I think you need to ask yourself the question at least as to whether you want to bid for that business, because it is likely that they will be looking purely at the price rather than the value offer. And you could be going in offering lots of value, and you're set up to offer lots of value, but then being forced to deliver it at a price. And that normally ends in an unprofitable or an unhappy customer, because their expectations are much higher than you're prepared to invest in their business. So I think somebody once said to me, you only have a strategy when you say no. And I think this would be an example of whether you have a clear strategy for that type of customer and whether they fit your strategy. And then I think you have to be brave, if you can, to make that decision, because in the long term, or the medium and long term, it will be a better decision for your business. But, you know, it's really difficult to turn away money. So you have to, you know, you have to make that type of call. You know, only you can decide whether you want to go down that route.
Thank you very much, David. So moving on, I'm very much aware of the time here, so I'm going to move on to my next question. So that was brilliant. You gave us lots and lots of information there to think about our value proposition, and some really good strategies to actually start to get us started on that. So a question for Paul: how can you make your sales force your USP?
Well, one of the things that stick in my mind from my conversations with what is now Sir Richard Branson was early on when he said to me, Paul, there's profit in differentiation. The more you can be different, that's where you can actually make your money. And of course, Virgin Atlantic was known as having a product and service differentiation, but I really wanted the sales force to have the same reputation, if you like. And so it took a while, but yet, first of all, you have to find out how good your own sales force are and how they're operating. And then you set your plan out with regards to things that you want to be better at. But you also have to understand your competitors extremely well as well. And you can usually, what we did, we clearly be talking to our customers a lot, and we get a lot of conversations and information from them. We'd be attending exhibitions or various events whereby, you know, the competitors, you know, would be speaking. So we got a fair idea of the airline representative persona, if you like. And people would say to me, well, Paul, you know, what's your strategy when you compete against BA? I said, well, if they go right, I go left. I just do something completely the opposite to what they actually do. And I think we invested a lot in the sales force, not just in training, but we invested every single year the same amount of money to continue on with the coaching and to reinforce the way that they were perceived in the marketplace. So classic examples would be, you know, they had the accountability to make a decision. They could construct their own financial agreements with customers, but in certain guidelines. But the customer got to see that they were talking to people that actually could make a decision, whereas the competitors would be giving their sales force basically what it was that they had to go to the customer with, and there was very little negotiation unless you got the very top person in. Whereas, you know, my guys were given the training, given the accountability, and encouraged to, you know, take those particular, take those risks, which worked. And there's a very quick story of we were at an event, number of customers, mixed, existing customers, potential customers, and one turned around to me and said, well, who does your sales training, Paul? I said, well, we don't do sales training, but that's a different story. So why'd you ask? He says, well, your guys come to me and they'll ask me a question and summarize, and then they go away. And a couple of weeks later, they'll be back in touch again and ask me a few more questions, and then they go away and come back. and then they'll ask me a few more questions, and then usually around the third or the fourth meeting, they'll come back to me with a proposition of where they think Virgin Atlantic can sit within my program and what it'll do for me and what it'll do for the business. I said, oh, that's good. They said, well, what do the competitors do then? Most of the time they come in and offer me low prices on places I don't fly to. And then a number of other people in that room then say, and I said, actually, Paul, we have to say that, you know, that is fairly consistent with our experience also. So I think, you know, if you can also take your best investment, which are your people, your greatest asset in any particular business, and invest in them, and also think about how you can make them difference in the marketplace, then that's something that we did very successfully, I would say.
Fantastic. And actually on that subject of sales training, so how can I ensure that when I do invest in sales training, it improves performance, Paul?
Well, I'd say don't do sales training unless you've got a few other things in place. First of all, I think the most important thing is that you have to have a sales culture within your organization. If you haven't got sales culture within your organization, then the sales training investment could well be wasted, because it very much then relies upon how the individual is determined to actually change their own behaviors and be successful. And I think that's the important thing. You've got to have this culture within the business. That culture has to be led throughout the organization. If I had my time again, I wouldn't call my sales managers who had teams, I wouldn't call them managers, I'd call them coaches. So I'd make it really, really clear what it may sound semantical, but very important, what their role was. The role is to coach your team to greater success. And the training element of it reinforces the sales culture and the behavioral change within their organization to make you a truly successful sales team. I'd said to my guys right at the very beginning, what I'd like to do is to be able to take this team, lift it out of Virgin Atlantic and drop it into any business, in any industry, anywhere, and be able to be as successful as we are now, because you can always learn the product. And I know from, you know, through what's going on at the moment, there's a lot of my team are in, you know, the NHS, they're in communications, they're in, you know, confectionery, a whole range of different businesses. They all refer back to the development that we gave them, which is, you know, help them to be more successful with their particular careers. So I think the two things I'd say is you have to be committed to creating a sales culture. You have to make sure that as a result of that, you realize it's behavioral change, and it's not going to take 2 or 3 weeks, depending upon the size of your organization, could take a couple of years. And then you use the combination of classroom training with coaching in order to make sure that you increase the chances of the success of your investment. I invested £80,000 every year from 2000 to 2012 in the team, and even if they've been through programs, we'd have reviews, you know, in that particular sense. So I'm bound to say it was successful, wasn't it? But I think the numbers when I left, you know, back that up, and I think some of the comments from the guys that I see now would also, you know, back that up as well.
So my last question to you is a bit of inspiration. This question comes from Theo, and he wanted to know, what is the best deal you've closed, and this is to all of you, the best deal you've ever closed in your lifetime, and how did it happen?
Maybe I'll kick off while Jeff and David. It almost what struck me was there are a few, but I'm going to pick one because it's on something that David mentioned earlier on about, you know, avoiding or how to deal with price pressure as well, and the decision that you have to take. Again, we were, one of the challenges that we had was the city was dominated by, you know, British Airways historically, you know, that establishment, and Virgin Atlantic, which we've seen as being very anti-establishment. Gradually over time, what actually happened is that we completely reversed that. But there was one very large multinational bank in Canary Wharf that we were just down to the final negotiation with. And my sales manager had called me in, room full of people, and we're talking, multi-markets, lots and lots of revenue, and sort of a really important, it was an iconic brand, so important to get it within the portfolio. And we had this particular meeting. All the value proposition work had been done. We closed off all the objections, and then the global buyer turned around and said, "Well, okay, Paul. Actually, now we'll sign the agreement right now if you agree to match Cathay Pacific's price." And I looked at a sales manager, a guy called Stephen Connolly, and I turned around and I picked up my briefcase and I closed it. And I turned around and said, "Unfortunately, therefore, you have to bring the meeting to a close." And I quickly looked at Steve and he'd gone pale. I thought I was going to have to pick him up. And they said, "Pardon?" I said, "Sorry, but I'm just not going to do that." So he said, "Well, tell you what?" He said, "We'll give you 10 minutes. You want to have a 10-minute break and think about that." So I said, "Fine." So anyway, Stephen's at this particular point gave me a very hard time. And he'd worked on this for about 2 years. And I said, "We're sticking to our guns. They need us, because otherwise, they just need us. And besides, they're a very good carrier, Cathay Pacific, but for a whole host of other reasons, they need us." And he went back in the room and turned and said, "Well, Paul, have you changed your position?" I said, "No." I said, "We've already made a number of concessions, and so this is where it ends." Anyway, we did win that business, I'm pleased to say. Well, that is one of the things that David mentioned. It's like, you've done your best. Now is not the time to crumble, and we didn't. So I think I had to go and take Stephen for a stiff drink after, but apart from that, it had a happy ending.
I'll jump in there as well, because I think that's a very good story about maintaining your value in difficult times. And Paul, you did a great job in having the bottle to do that, to be frank, because I know a lot of salespeople would have just fallen over and be thankful they got a discount, and away you go. Just on my experience, my best experience is one of the first contracts I did when I set up on my own, where I took the idea that value and price could be at different levels. And something for the group as a whole is you can actually charge different prices for different levels of service you offer. So you might decide that you have a good service where you offer a certain amount of features or benefits, and you charge a particular price for that. So that might be very good for people who don't have a lot of money or aren't interested in a small price. Then you might offer a different level of value or features and benefits and charge more for that. And then you might have one where you could do a big job on them, and you could offer a lot more, and you could charge a lot more for it. And I've used that. It's quite a well-known pricing methodology called good, better, best. And what it does is, if you get into a negotiation about price, you can then start to remove levels of value. So you're never really compromising yourself. You're just delivering against the needs of the customer. And I think that's, to me, that was a real eye-opener for me. I hadn't used it very often in the past, but I thought that idea of having good, better, best, there's a lot about that methodology on the internet. If people want to look it up, is really resonates with me about linking value and price.
Yeah, really helpful. And Jeff?
Yeah, apart from persuading my wife Leslie to marry me, which is probably the biggest deal of all. Yeah, so many stories. You'll have to read my book when I write it. But one that comes to mind that's sort of relevant to some of the things we've been talking about today was, it was very unusual for us to actually be competing with anybody for our business. Normally, we develop relationships, develop needs and wants, and it was kind of our baby, and we came up with a budget and we won the business. That was a more regular way that we've done business. But there was one opportunity in particular whereby we were introduced by a network, well, an ex-customer of ours was now working as the sales director for another company. He brought us in. There was quite a big project, a sales development project right across Europe. And there was a beauty parade of 7 suppliers, right? And we were in there late, just before the MD was about to make the decision. And so my business partner, Steve, went and met the MD, found out what was going on, had about 3-4 pages of notes about what they were trying to achieve, because Steve is really good at developing needs and wants with prospects. We met at the Aurora Hotel in Crawley. We are working on what our proposal was going to be. And Steve looked me in the eye and said, we're competing with 7 other people here, or 6 other people. We need to be expensive. It was absolutely fantastic. It was inspirational from Steve. So what we did was we actually upped our day rate, and we were by far the most expensive, at least 50% more expensive than our nearest competitor in the beauty parade. And we won the business because we understood their needs and wants. We knew what was mission critical to them. And our price actually signaled the quality of what we were about.
Yep.
And it won us the business, and went on to work with them for 2.5 years before they were bought by Gartner.
Fantastic.
That's a fantastic example of
Yeah.
perceived value, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is a really, really good example. I hope you don't mind, everybody. We did slightly run over, but I thought the stories were so good and so inspiring that I'd have allowed the guys to run over a little bit. So I think we have to finish here. And so thank you so much, all 3 of you. Really amazing advice there. Some really good things. And I love the iceberg analogy that you used, Jeff. That was really good. So thank you for all your practical advice. And there's certainly some really good stuff there for people to go away and actually put into action straight away. If you want to follow up individually with any of our panel, and I am absolutely aware that there are 1 or 2 people that we haven't got round to answering their questions, so I will pass those on to the panel, but there will be an email that comes out to you after this session with the email contact addresses for all 3 of our panelists. So if you want to pose any questions to them individually, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to follow that up. There's also a survey in there as well. So if I could just ask you all to actually just complete the survey, it just helps us to be more relevant. So much content there. We'd love to have you back. Thank you so much to all of you. And if there's a lot of content in there, and there'll also be a recording of the event as well, so you can watch it at your leisure and have a look and see if you've missed out on any of the pertinent points for you. So thank you very much for all of you who attended today, and thank you so much to the panelists. Bye-bye.
For now.